Hello and welcome to this After Effects certification preparation series of videos. I'm Luisa Winters. In this video, I want to start Objective 4, and that is about creating and modifying visual elements. So in here is where we really work with After Effects. So this objective covers core tools and functionality of the application, as well as tools that affect the visual appearance of composition elements. So let's go ahead and get started with Objective 4.1, 4.1a to be more exact. And that is to use core tools and features to create content and create visual elements using a variety of tools. We're going to talk about solids, shape layers, and creating shapes from vector layers. So let's get to After Effects. In After Effects, let's go ahead and open the composition named solids, shapes from vector layers, and all of that. So let me actually make this a little bit wider, in this column wider, so that we can read the name of the composition. It's quite long. So solids, shape layers, and creating shapes from vector layers. To open this, just double click it. And of course, I'm using the exercise files that you can download from my Google Drive. The link is in the description of this video. Of course, if you haven't downloaded these files, if you don't want to download these files, that's quite all right. All you have to do is create a composition and start following me with an Illustrator file, a shape layer, and of course, a solid. So this is what I have in here. And the only reason why I have these here is because I want you to see the icons to the left of the layer name. See, this one here is an Illustrator icon. This one is a star. That is your visual indication that this is a shape layer. And yeah, I know it's called I am a shape layer, but just pay attention to the icon. And of course, this one is a solid. So like I said, we're not really doing anything other than looking at these icons. So let's just select all of these and delete. We have created solid layers before, but in case you missed that video, to create a solid layer, it's just layer, new, solid. Look at the shortcut, which is Control or Command Y, and there you go. Choose the size, choose the color, give it a name, whatever. So I'm not going to create the solid because we've done it plenty of times, so I'm just going to cancel out of this. Let's, however, talk about shape layers. Shape layers are unique in After Effects. They can do things that no other layer can do. So let's experiment with only some of these. And, before we get started, let me just tell you, I'm going to go a little bit beyond what the test is going to take you, but still, I'm not going to take you through everything that is to be known about shape layers. It's just some things that I consider to be super important. So if no layer is selected in the timeline or otherwise, and you draw a mask, you're not drawing a mask, you're drawing a shape layer. So if I just go here, and obviously I have no layers selected because I have no layers in this composition, and I just grab one of these masking tools and I click and drag, well, that's a shape layer. All right, so let me undo that. Let me just draw a shape layer like here in this corner. Do you see where the anchor point is? It's in the middle of the composition. As soon as I release my mouse button, boom, the anchor point jumps to the middle of the shape layer. That is a preference. So if you go to Edit, Preferences, General, and on the Mac, After Effects, Preferences, General, you will see a setting in here that lets you center the anchor point in new shape layers. This is not checked by default. I like checking it, but I'll leave that up to you. That's why they're called preferences, because you prefer to have it this way or that other way. So I'm just going to cancel out of this. And now I'm going to delete this shape layer. It doesn't matter how you create it. It could be with a pen tool. It could be with any of these tools. You can also create a shape layer by going Layer, New. Well, it helps if I have the composition selected, right? Layer, New, Shape Layer. And there you go. Notice that this shape layer, even though it's there, see how it's called Shape Layer 1? It's completely empty. I can start adding stuff to that by actually drawing in here or by going to this add menu. All right, so this is what it's really going beyond what the test is going to take you through, but it's good to know. I can add a group, a rectangle, an ellipse, a polystar, a path. Can I draw them? Yes, of course I can. But of course. But I can also add them. After I add that, say a rectangle, right, which is just a small square here in the middle of the layer, I can then add a fill to that. I can add a stroke, a gradient fill, a gradient stroke. Yes, I can have gradient fills and strokes. So I can add those things, all right? So I'm just going to delete that. Now, if I just draw it, before or after I draw it, it doesn't really matter. Say I'm going to draw it like this, right? And then I go, oh no, you know what? I didn't want a fill to be the solid. I wanted that fill to be a gradient. Well, I can click on the word fill, the word, not that little swatch, no, the word fill. And now I can choose from no fill, solid, which is what we have right now, to a linear gradient. See, linear gradient. Look, I can even change the blending mode of that fill. I know. I can also have a radial gradient. All right, so these are, of course, gradients that I was working with before. Chances are that if you do this and you've never worked with gradients before, you're going to get a grayscale gradient. But it doesn't matter. The point is that you can have a linear gradient, a radial gradient, or a solid. And you can change the blending mode and the opacity of this fill. Super cool. Say I want to leave it as a solid, right? And now I select that. I can add another fill. I can add another fill. And look, now I have two fills in that layer. And I can now click here and I can say, no, you know, this fill has to be whatever. Let's say green. But that's a solid fill. Well, I can click on the word fill and I can change it to say a radial gradient. See what I'm saying? So if I change it to a radial gradient, now understand that I am going to fill two, not fill one. And that's what is selected here. See how fill one is selected here, and then I have another one called fill two? So I can just edit them independently from each other, and I can just go to fill two, and I can go, no, you know what? I changed my mind. You need to be a solid. And now I can go to fill one, and I can say, hey, you know what? I want you to be a different color, and this also changed to fill one, but whatever. And I can just change these things. Of course, it's not changing. Why not? Go ahead and change. And now I have two fills, one is blue, one is green, and now I can change those blending modes. The important thing here that I really want to communicate is that you can add different things to the shape layer, and depending on what is selected, you can modify that. All right, so let's give you a different example. I'm going to draw, I don't know, an ellipse, right? I'll make it a circle, right? I press the shift key as I was drawing it, and that's a perfect circle. With that layer selected, I can add other things. I can, for example, add a rounded rectangle, right? Let me make it really rounded. And that is part of that same shape layer. And I can select both of those independently. So I can expand the ellipse, and I can go to the ellipse path, and I can say, oh, you know what? I'm going to move you. I only moved the ellipse, not the rounded rectangle. And I can move it in the X and the Y. I can change the size. I can change its color because you see, this has a fill, and I can go, oh, you know what? I don't want you to be blue. I want you to be red, whatever. So it's part of the same shape layer, but now I have two separate shapes, two different colors, and one could be a gradient, one could be a solid, whatever. All right? There are other things that I can add. And the best thing to see this is with the stars. So, you know, this is a flower, not a star. If I want to reset the star, double click it, see it? Then you can delete this. Then you can click and drag, leave the mouse button down, right? So now I'm gonna press and hold Control, which is Command on the Mac. See how now my rays are pointier. Up arrow, I have more rays. Left arrow, see how the curvature goes. Right arrow, see how the curvature goes, all right? So all of these things are because I have my mouse button down and I am modifying the shape as I draw. Okay, so let's say I want it like this, whatever. I'm going to make it about yay big, boom, the anchor point centers, and I'm good. I can now select that shape layer, click on the word fill, and I can say, oh, you know what, give me a radial gradient. And I click OK, and if I zoom in, you see that the center is yellow and the outside is white. I can click now on the swatch and I can change these properties. For example, I don't want for this color to be that orangey. I want it to be, say, reddish. And I select that color stop, and then I choose the color, right? I can add another color stop, say here, and I can say, well, you know what? I want that to be blue or white or black or whatever it is. And how much the gradient itself will be depends on where I have these color stops and how abrupt the gradient will be. Like, for example, let me put this red, say here. And now I'm going to put this, let me undo that. By the way, to delete a color stop, just drag it out. And now I'm going to put this really close to it. Do you see how there is like no gradient whatsoever? So the more apart the color stops are, the more gradient we see in between the two colors. So if I delete the blue and I go just with the red, say I'm going to go here, and now I'm going to bring the white really close to it. I mean, that is almost like Japanese flag thing, right? So if I want a more gradient, I separate these more, and there you have it. So I want this color stop really to be more orangey because I really want like a daisy-like type thing. And there you go. So now I have my flower, whatever, right? And I'm going to zoom out so you can see it better. With it selected, and remember, we can select the different elements. I can select the polystar, and if I have another polystar or another ellipse or whatever, I can select it, right? I'm just going to do it with one so that we don't get confused. But remember, we're going to target whatever we have selected. And if we have the layer selected, then we target everything. So this has the polystar selected. This has the layer selected. In fact, you know what? I think I'm going to draw another polystar just so that you see the difference. I have polystar 1, polystar 2, right? I'm going to now select the layer itself. See how none of these are selected? Now I'm going to add, say, a pucker and bloat, and there it is. I can change the amount. Do you see how both my flowers are being targeted? Both of them. All right, so I'm going to undo that or just delete the pucker and bloat, right? There you go. Now I'm going to address only polystar 1. Do you see how polystar 2 is not selected? Only polystar 1 is selected. Now this, I'm going to target just that. So add pucker and bloat. This is now affecting only that one polystar or that one flower, not both. So in After Effects, you have to target, you have to select, you have to click on whatever it is that you want to be affected by whatever it is that you're doing. In this case, it's the pucker and bloat. So I'm going to delete polystar 2. Just click on it, press the delete key, and there it is. And I can keep on adding. Because I only have one polystar, only one thing, I can target the whole layer, and it doesn't matter. I could either do this or click on the polystar, and it's not going to make a difference because, well, I only have one thing in it. And I can keep on adding things. So add, say, twist. And I can just add the twist to that, so it looks like yay. And that's kind of cool. So notice that you can add these things to the shape layers. That's unique in After Effects. You can't really add things to other layers. Again, unique to After Effects. And again, I could add a stroke to this. I could add another polystar, an ellipse, a rectangle, whatever it is. And there are many. So there's not just a twist, there's wiggle path, wiggle transform, zigzag. There's a ton of things. I'm not going to go through all of them because, that's really not part of the test. But just know that shape layers are unique and you can start adding stuff and you can create really, really, really cool things using shape layers. Now, speaking of shape layers, we can grab Illustrator files, say the logo, and we can turn that vector layer into a shape. All right, so we can turn vector layers into shapes. How do we do that? Well, easy. Right-click, create shapes from vector layer. Now, before we do that, I'm going to tell you it's not going to work with every single layer. And here we go. Boom. The text disappears. The text disappears. We could not turn the text into a shape layer. Why is that? Right? So this may happen to you if you're working with Illustrator files. Well, let's select the logo here in the project panel. And now let's go edit, edit original, edit original. After Effects is going to open this file in Illustrator. So it's going to open it in Illustrator. If you don't have Illustrator installed, yeah, go ahead and do it. Actually, you need Illustrator to work in After Effects. All right, so here we go. Here's the text layer. The text layer is different. If I select it, you immediately see that I can change the font, I can change the size. In other words, this is like live text. And those you can't turn into shape layers in After Effects. So what we need to do is convert this into a regular plain vanilla layer. Before I do that, I'm going to do a save as. So File, Save As, and I'm going to call it Logo 2. Logo 2, because I don't want to mess with the original, Accept here, if you're following along. Accept the defaults, click OK, and there you have it. So I have the text layer selected. Now I can go to Object, Expand both the object and the fill. There you go. Save it, Control or Command S, and now let's go back to After Effects. I can import, Control I, Command I, and I'm going to import it as footage, and I'm going to merge all the layers because it doesn't really matter. I'm going to put it in the timeline. I'm going to delete these other two, and I'm going to do exactly the same thing. So this is now the new layer that we created in Illustrator. So same thing, right-click, create, shapes from vector layer. Boom, the text comes along, and now I can delete the Illustrator layer, and I'm left with my shape layer. And that's really, really, really cool. Because now I can use all of these add things into all of these contents. And look, I have all of these groups, right? I have all of these things. And by the way, I have all of these groups because I have all these letters, and each letter turned into a group. If I don't want to do that, say, oh no, I really wanted the triangles to be separate and blah, blah, blah. You already know how to import Illustrator files. All right, so here we go. File import, Control or Command I, click on Logo 2, not footage, but composition, layer size, there you go. And now we have a composition named Logo 2 that has all of our separate elements. I can select all of the elements, right-click, create, shapes from vector layer, there you have it. I can delete now the Illustrator counterparts, and now each one of them is separate, and I can even select all of them, click on add, and let's say twist. I usually add twist because it's the easiest to see. And now I can expand the twist on all of them. I don't really have to, but I'll expand the twist on all of them. I'm going to make this a little bit taller, and I'm going to select all of these twists, like yay, just click and drag. And now I can twist all of them at the same time. You can animate this or not, right? You can just do a very little like waving around. You could put a little wiggle expression in here, whatever it is. The point is that you can convert these files, these vector files, into shape layers, and they have all of the properties of a shape layer. All right, so before moving on, I want to make sure that I mention something about vector layers. All right, so I'm going to select all of these, delete, and there you have it. And now I'm going to put an Illustrator file, it doesn't matter which one, into the timeline. I'll use Vines because, we haven't used those. This is a vector file. It was created in Illustrator, and a vector file is not made out of pixels, right? You already know that they are mathematical equations, and we can make them as big as we want, and we won't lose resolution. They're not going to look pixelated because they're not made out of pixels. Let's see if that's true. S for scale, and I'm just going to make this much bigger. Look at this. It's already looking pixelated. I mean, look at that. I mean, what gives, right? So this is the thing, and what you need to understand about how After Effects thinks. First of all, if you can see it in your computer monitor, it's not vector. I mean, let's just put that clear out there. Because you can't see vector files. Because vector files, by definition, are not made out of pixels. And if they're not made out of pixels, and all our computer screens display is pixels, then how are we going to see them? We can't. So what we see is a raster representation of that vector file. So our computer programs, After Effects, Illustrator, Photoshop, whatever it is, they rasterize, in other words, turn into pixels, whatever vector file we have so that we can see it. What After Effects does is that it rasterizes the file, that Illustrator file or that whatever file you have, at its native scale, in other words, at 100%. And when you scale it up, you're scaling the raster and not the vector. In other words, you're scaling pixels. What you need to tell After Effects is, hey, After Effects, stop it. Don't do that. Don't do that. I need you to scale the vector and then rasterize again so that I can see it. I need you to continuously rasterize. That's the words I want you to remember. Continuously rasterize. And that's this little guy. See the switches? If you don't see the switches and modes, click on the button down here. If you don't see the button, right-click the column header, go to column, and make sure that you see switches. All right, so here we go. As soon as I select this little thingy, in other words, the little checkbox under it, boom, there you go. Continuously rasterize. If you leave your mouse cursor on top of that, look at the tooltip. For comp layer collapse transformations and for vector layer continuously rasterize. That's what we want. So I call this the little sunshine because it looks like a little sunshine. This little light of mine, almost always, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. So if we had a text layer, right, so I'm going to delete that. If we had text, right, I'm just going to type text. And in fact, this composition is kind of small, so I'm going to go to composition settings. I'll choose whatever, 8K. Doesn't matter. Do you see how the little sunshine is checked? But it's also grayed out. You can't shut it out. So when you create a vector file inside of After Effects, whether it's text or even a shape layer, the continuously rasterize is already turned on and you can't shut it off. It's when you import something from outside of After Effects, whether it's the logo, whether it's the vines, and then you scale that, it just goes, oh, yeah, it doesn't work. This little light of mine, almost always, let it shine. All right? Okay, so I think this brings us to the end of this video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.